Why do empires really fall? It's not because of bad kings, disastrous wars, or political chaos. Those are just the symptoms. The real cause, the one that operates silently beneath the surface of history, is energy. The invisible fuel that powers armies, economies, and entire civilizations. Every great superpower looks invincible right up until the moment its energy system stops paying for itself. Rome fell the day its slave labor became too expensive. The British Empire cracked when its coal fields peaked. America's global dominance began the moment oil became cheap. And it will end the moment it isn't. This is the energy collapse theory, and it doesn't just explain the past. It's the story of our present. Today, energy analysts believe the world is quietly crossing a dangerous threshold in oil efficiency. For the first time in history, we may be entering a truly global collapse cycle. To understand why, you have to go back to the original sources of power that built our world. Let's start with Rome. Rome wasn't built on democracy or military genius alone. It was built on human energy. Millions of slaves captured from across the Mediterranean. A Roman villa, a mine, even a war machine ran on one simple, brutal equation. More conquest equals more slaves, which equals more energy. This system worked for centuries, fueling the empire's expansion. But eventually, this system began to crumble. The further Rome expanded, the harder and more expensive conquest became. New territories were poorer. Revolts became common. Maintaining the empire's vast borders drained resources. The energy return on investment was collapsing. It started costing more energy to capture and control slaves than the energy those slaves provided back to the empire. When the energy users, the Roman citizens, demanded more than the energy producers, the slaves, could deliver, the system strained. And once slave labor became inefficient, Rome had no backup plan. Its entire energy economy died from the inside, long before the barbarians arrived at the gates. Now, fast forward over 1,000 years to the British Empire. If Rome ran on muscle, Britain ran on blackfire. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just a technological miracle, it was an energy revolution. Britain hit the jackpot: coal, black, dense, and unbelievably powerful. For centuries, the energy return on coal was enormous. You burned a little, and you got a lot back. This cheap energy powered steamships, railroads, factories, and the greatest navy the world had ever seen. As long as British coal mines surged with output, British currency and British power surged with them. But by the late 19th century, something changed. The easy-to-reach coal was gone. Mines had to go deeper. Extraction became harder, more dangerous, and more expensive. The energy return on energy invested, or EROI, began to shrink. Britain didn't collapse overnight. It slowly lost the energy advantage that had made it the workshop of the world. Other nations, like Germany and America, began tapping into their own newer, richer coal fields. Britain's energy base became outdated, just like Rome's slave system before it. The empire that ran on steam eventually, and quite literally, ran out of steam. This brings us to the modern era, and the American empire. If coal built Britain, then oil built America. The 20th century belonged to the nation that mastered gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel. Oil has one of the highest energy densities ever used by humanity, and in the early days, its EROI was staggering. In Texas, for every 1 unit of energy you spent drilling, you got 100 units back. A ratio of 100 to 1. This was the golden age of American expansion. It fueled high wages, explosive industrial growth, cheap transportation for everyone, and a military with nearly limitless energy. Oil gave the United States the power to win global wars, dominate global trade, and establish the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. But then, just like every empire before it, America began to hit its energy wall. The decline is something no one can ignore. Today, oil doesn't just flow out of the ground like water. We have to scrape it from tar sands, fracture it from deep shale rock, and drill for it miles under the ocean floor. The modern EROI for many of these fields is 81, or even lower. Some sources are nearing 3-1, which is barely above the minimum needed to sustain a complex society. For perspective, ancient Rome needed an EROI of about 5-1 to function. Modern industrial nations require an EROI of at least 10-1, and ideally, closer to 14-1, to maintain their current lifestyles. America's energy base is now slipping below that line. And history shows us, when an empire's energy advantage slips, its currency and its economic power are sure to follow. This isn't just an American problem anymore. For the first time in human history, the entire world runs on one primary energy system, fossil fuels, dominated by oil, and that system is now producing diminishing returns across almost every major region. The giant fields in the Middle East are aging. US shale has a notoriously low EROI. Deepwater drilling is incredibly expensive, and new discoveries are tiny compared to the giants of the past. This isn't about running out of oil. We have plenty of oil left. This is about running out of cheap, easy-to-get energy, and cheap energy is the foundation of social stability. The signs of an earlier-stage energy collapse are all around us, though we often misdiagnose them. Economists blame inflation, currency crises, and global conflict on politics or bad policy. But the energy collapse theory sees something deeper. Think about the rising cost of living. It's a direct reflection of the fact that our economy is spending more energy just to get energy. What about stagnant wages? That means there's less surplus energy available for the general population. The explosion of national debt, that's governments borrowing money to compensate for a decline in real energy profit. And the rising geopolitical tensions, that's the great powers competing for the world's remaining high EROI energy fields. Even our modern digital world, the internet, data centers, artificial intelligence, all of it runs on electricity generated mostly from these same declining fossil fuels. The more complex a civilization becomes, the more energy it needs just to stay alive. Today, our global complexity is rising, while our primary energy efficiency is falling. That gap between what we need and what we can affordably get is the danger zone. Energy analysts warn that modern civilization begins to destabilize when the average EROI drops below 71. Many regions are heading there fast. If the world's primary energy source cannot provide high-efficiency returns, history shows us what happens next. Currencies lose trust. Economies shrink. States weaken and often turn more authoritarian. And societies begin to fragment. It's the exact same pattern we saw in Rome, in Britain, and in every other empire that became too dependent on a single, dominant energy source. But this time is different. If this collapse comes, it won't be local. It will be global, because, for the first time, our energy base is global. So, is this a final warning, or a final chance? The energy collapse theory doesn't predict certain doom. It predicts transformation. When an old energy system fails, a civilization faces a choice. It either adopts a new, more efficient energy source, like when coal replaced wood or oil replaced coal, or it collapses under the weight of its own inefficiency. Today, we stand at that crossroads. Will renewable technologies like solar and wind reach the high EROI required to sustain our complex industrial civilization? Will new energy breakthroughs, like nuclear fusion, emerge before oil's efficiency drops too low to support the transition? Or will the world experience a slow, systemic contraction, similar to the empires of the past? One thing is certain: empires fall when their energy falls, and the world's energy return is falling. The next few decades will reveal whether humanity finds a new fuel for its future, or becomes just another chapter in the vast, repeating pattern of history. Thanks for watching. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world.